You're live.
Okay, we'll call the public hearing to order. And it's consideration of the land sale, 1020 Richard Green Lane, Hubbards, at a price less than market value for the Ashpataway Trust. Mr. Lamy, is this matter properly before council?
Yes, Mr. Warden, I reviewed this. I think it's properly before council.
Okay, thank you. Overview by the CAO.
Yes, good morning. We had a letter of request dated January 24th, submitted by the chair of the Ashpataway Heritage Trust on behalf of the board of directors, requesting to purchase land at a price less than market value. And it is land on which the AHT office building and through the years early learning center are located, as well as several additional properties adjacent to the trail system that runs next to the property. So there was 5 parcels initially requested. Council has considered that request at a meeting on February 8th, directed staff to respond to the board indicating that the municipality would be willing to give them the land on which the AHT building and the daycare is located at no cost, but that we would like to retain ownership of the remaining 4 lots, the ones that are adjacent to the trail. And so the land has a total estimated market value of $376,000. The Municipal Government Act allows council to sell or lease property at a price less than market value to a nonprofit organization for any purpose that the council considers to be beneficial to the municipality. And according to the MGA, in order to do that, a resolution to sell or lease the property at less than market value needs to be passed by at least 2/3 of the majority of council. And we need to hold this public hearing. So that is the summary and the overview. We had advertisements in the paper on April 3rd and on April 10th in the progress bulletin, so that meets our notification requirements for the public hearing.
Did we get any comments?
No comments.
Okay. Okay, comments by the public on this request? Anyone wish to speak to the issue?
Just a comment, is there any clause in there that it would revert back to the municipality if they dissolve or, you know, the daycare could or?
So we haven't prepared a sale agreement. It's the decision to do that, and then we would prepare that agreement.
Okay. So if there are any comments by members of council? Okay, we're basically at the position where we have to make a decision. Someone prepared to make a motion one way or the other?
I'll move that we go ahead with the sale.
Seconder?
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? It's a majority, so that should count for 2/3.
Sure.
That is all there is in the public hearing, so a motion to adjourn. Second. Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, so now we're moving on. Council? So we'll call the council meeting to order. And the first item, of course, is the approval of the agenda and order of business. There are a couple of changes. Derek Swinner, the 9:15 appointment has been moved to May the 2nd. And we have 7.4, Brian Specco, June Hume, Rick Foster are on public presentations.
Yes.
And I think your words are on the agenda, too.
They are.
Okay, yeah. So that's the only changes I had. Does anyone else have any?
I just wanted to add Municipal Planning Advisory Committee, just an update.
Motion to approve the agenda as amended.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Public input? Any other than the appointments? I'm not aware of it. Okay. Minutes of the previous meeting, council April the 11th, errors or omissions? Someone prepared to move the approval?
I'll move.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, proclamations. Email from Prostate Cancer Foundation dated April 1st, requesting municipality light up the municipal building in blue in September for a day, a week, or the entire month. Probably not for a month. A day or a week, or what do we traditionally do?
Policy is 2 weeks.
2 weeks for the light up?
2 weeks?
Yeah.
Motion to approve the light up for 2 weeks in September. Move, I guess.
Seconded. Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Committee reports. Committee of the Whole, April 11th.
Just a motion there.
Yeah.
All of 2024-183, excluding August Hall, through to 2024-187.
Seconded.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Committee of the Whole, April 18th.
Move from 2024-192 through to 2024-197. Motion to approve.
Seconded.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, Derek Swinnerly was on for 9:15. He's not here. Next one's not until 10 o'clock. So I guess I'm on to bylaws and policies. Bylaw adoption, second and final reading, infrastructure charges bylaw.
Yeah, so this is just needing to be seconded and final reading to the bylaw for the development charges.
Somebody prepared to do that? Trying to find it all. Got a lot of stuff here. Yeah.
So basically, I mean, there's a lot
We
of
just need
different.
a motion for second.
Yeah, but basically the bylaw is just the charge that is,
The development.
the development charge and that, you know.
And did we put the amendment in there, or do we need that amendment? That's another question. Do you remember? There is one change highlighted there, since you've given first reading to it, so that's, it's on page 4 of the bylaw, so it's, it's clause 5, sub B. The change that we've added is notwithstanding paragraph 5A, the infrastructure charge that applies to the Chester Basin service area shall not come into effect until the new Chester Basin municipal sewer system has been constructed and is operational as confirmed by a resolution of council at that time. So council hasn't finalized and approved that project yet, so if and when that happens, the charge would come into effect there. So that's the only change.
So we need to move to second reading? No, it's final reading, so we need to adopt it.
Yeah.
Somebody prepared to move, we adopt it.
So moved.
Second.
Second that.
Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. 8.2 policy adoption, final notice, infrastructure super.
Sorry, this is the policy. No,
Oh, okay.
this is the policy. So there was the bylaw, and this is the second notice for the policy.
Again, it's adoption.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, point 3, policy adoption, request for direction prepared by corporate strategic management, community development, recreation, and abuse prevention policy.
Gordon's going to speak.
Speak up. Morning, Council. Good morning. So we're just here this morning to ask you to provide a notice of intention to adopt policy. We don't have a number yet for the abuse prevention policy. Quick background on this is our insurer requires that we have something in writing that protects both us and the folks that we invite into our events and programs. So we worked with the insurer, used some of their templates, did some of our own research as well to draft the policy that we put in front of you. Two quick things to note. Since we first presented this to you, the insurer has reviewed the policy as we presented to you and have adopted it, or approved it, I should say, so they're cool with it. And then the second thing that happened is that Sam was able to give eyes to it as well, and we made a couple of quick notes, or quick changes that he had suggested as well to it. So,
His changes suit the insurance company?
yes, we have no concern about that, and that was provided to council.
So it was provided in your OneDrive last night, and there's copies on your desk here today.
Oh, yeah.
So just a couple of little language changes. Nothing too substantial.
Insurance company argued before we.
No, we had no concerns with that, so we felt comfortable bringing to you with those two little changes. So with that, if there's any questions, happy to answer them. Otherwise, the implications of this is there might be concerns from our insurer if we don't have this policy in place. So I encourage you to have a look at it.
Yeah, all we have to do is.
So you want a motion to proceed with the adoption of the abuse prevention policy?
Notice of intention, then we'll bring this back for second and final adoption.
Yeah,
So that's moved.
that's moved, yeah.
We have a seconder. Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Gordon.
Did you do the same as his mom, we did before?
I did, yes, I did, yeah. I just think the suggestions and definitions, modifications and stuff.
Yeah. Well, you've been shocked that you didn't want to change something.
Well, I think it's important that we do go back.
Okay, this one here will be a little lengthier, I believe. Village plan review, report on final engagement session.
Good morning, everyone. All right, so what I have today is a series of slides to review the last round of public engagement meetings that we held for the village plan review. So if you recall, last summer we held a series of meetings, and then in October brought back, it was a lengthier list of slides. Thankfully, each time we do this, the number of issues is short, which is good. To me, that's good progress. I guess we'll, just jumping right in here. So just a quick bit of background. February 29th, we brought draft 2 of the plan to council, and there were a few changes that council gave us direction on that date. So I just wanted to review those just so everybody's aware. So the first was to remove any residential options from the institutional zone. In the previous draft, there had been a provision that allowed residential uses by not-for-profit or other levels of government, and there was an issue with that in terms of our authority under the MGA to control who that was. So we pulled that out. Also at that February 29th meeting, we got direction to essentially take out virtually all of the regulations for short-term rentals from the land use bylaw, and we're going to look at that as a standalone licensing bylaw to deal with short-term rentals, and that we talked about the pros and cons to that. It gives us some more flexibility in how we regulate and enforce that. And thirdly, there was direction that the roof pitch calculations that we use in the architectural control zone, which had previously only applied to 1 and 2 unit buildings, should apply to basically all buildings, so commercial buildings as well as multi-unit buildings. So I take those as being decisions that we've already made, and I just wanted to reflect those. So then we held 2 meetings, March 26th and 28th. And as we had done previously, collected comments and feedback, which the original comments and emails are all attached in the package here. And I've done my best to summarize those in the slides. We had really good turnout at these meetings. I think our mail out to everyone, I think, was successful. I know the first meeting had 60 people, and the second, I would guess, was similar. I don't actually have a head count.
That's
So
pretty good turnout.
I think between 2 meetings this time, we had as many or more people than we did between 4 meetings last year. So that was great. What I'm hoping to do today is go through the summarized comments and feedback, discuss, get some direction on any of these issues that council would like to see changes made. Also have a discussion whether we need further round of public engagement. And so then ultimately get some direction either to come back with a final draft or to go out and hold another round of engagement. So just to jump right into them, and again, these are in no particular order. So the first one, there's 2 issues on this slide. One was that accessory structures should have a minimum roof pitch. So in the draft as it is today, accessory structures have a maximum height of 6 meters, but they don't require a sloped roof. So you could technically build a 6 meter tall flat roofed shed or garage. So there was a suggestion that should be brought in. So I think probably something in the range of 4 to 12 would be at a minimum would be reasonable. That's not a steeply pitched roof, but it certainly is not a flat roof. So that would be one. And secondly, something that came up a bit more recently was that architectural controls should prohibit what's often called a single slope or a shed roof. So I've got an image here of what I mean by that. So this would probably meet our pitch provisions if it was a steep enough pitch, but I think what the comments that we heard was that was not, that this design is not something that's in keeping with the look. And really when we were thinking about a pitched roof, we're thinking about, pitches on both sides. So we could easily add in language to just prevent this particular style of roof from being used. So in terms of options here, fairly straightforward. I don't have a stack recommendation on every single one you'll see as we go through, but in this case, my recommendation would be to implement both 1 and 2. We could also implement either or. We don't have to have both, or we could leave things as they are. So I don't know, but we don't usually go with motions, but we usually kind of try to get consensus. Yeah.
This is going to be long and complicated with lots of possibilities, so you need to be given some direction.
Right. Yeah. So I guess we'll maybe take a pause there and
I'll go to you
questions.
first. It's your district.
So this is one you're recommending.
Yes. So this would implement a pitch for accessory, and it would prohibit the shed roofs.
And that was the consensus, I believe, of the public.
Yes, I would say. Yeah, neither of these received a ton of feedback, but in both cases, this would be in conformance with what we heard. Yes. Yeah.
Are you comfortable with what you suggested?
Yeah.
Is anybody not?
1 and 2.
Okay, great. So there we are.
No. So the next one is one we've talked about a little bit before. So this is the issue of vinyl siding in particular. There was originally, when we brought the draft to VPAC, there was some discussion there, and then also more at the public sessions. So the way it's worded now is that structures that are 1,500 square feet in footprint or larger are not to use vinyl siding. Structures that are 1,500 square feet or smaller are allowed to use vinyl. There's a limit of 25% on the public facade, so that's basically the wall that faces the street.
Yes.
But then the other 3 sides could be clad in vinyl.
Yes.
What we heard consistently was that people do not like the 25% piece. There were camps that said prohibit vinyl. There were camps that said allow vinyl if it looks like resembles a traditional material, but across the board, everybody agreed they didn't like the 25% on the public facade. It was kind of an all or nothing approach, I would say. So like I said, we heard prohibit entirely. We heard allow it if it looks like a traditional material, and then regardless, we heard that the current proposal with allowing a small amount of the public facade to be covered in vinyl was
So the
not
biggest issue is
desirable.
don't allow it on the street facing piece.
I think the mix of several comments were made that just what kind of a structure would look like if it had 25% vinyl and then 75% wood shingle or something that we would consider to be an acceptable material. So if we go to the next slide here, I've got the options separately. So in this one, and again, I do have a recommendation here, but of course, all the other ones are up for consideration as well. So my recommendation here is that we prohibit vinyl entirely. That said, there other options here would be to prohibit, just simply prohibit vinyl on that public facade, get rid of the 25%, so that would mean the 3 sides that don't face the street could use vinyl, but the front would have to be something that would meet our architectural controls. And again, this is just on those smaller buildings. The next would be to, and this again was something we heard at VPAC and also in the public. There was a group, I'll call it a camp, a group of commenters that were in favor of allowing vinyl, but if it looked like a traditional siding material that we would allow. One of the reasons I'm not recommending this is that the language around that, it's very difficult to write a regulation that's going to be, and what it will inevitably do is leave interpretation open for our development officers, which
Would be challenging.
it can be exactly. I think it sets up a scenario where we're going to create conflict and as soon as something's approved, that all of this is somewhat subjective. So our development officer may say, yes, this resembles a shake symbol, and then somebody may say it absolutely doesn't. So I think that would be very tricky to regulate. And then of course option 4 is just to leave things as they are. Yeah, like I said, the recommendation here, I think the cleanest, simplest, and probably the majority of what we heard, if I had to say a majority, was probably to prohibit entirely, although like I said, there was a fairly strong camp to allow it if it looked close. Yeah.
Just get rid of it.
Yes.
Just a clarification, Bert.
Sure.
The prohibit vinyl siding, the second option on the public facade, how does that work if you're a corner lot?
Right, so the public facade, you're right, on a public facade could include more than one. Typically, it would be one wall, but it could be more than one if you're on a corner lot. Yeah.
That was the main
We're
consent.
just talking vinyl siding.
Yeah.
Yes, this is just vinyl, yeah.
Yeah, because I wouldn't want you guys to have to decide whether you thought it looked like wood or you didn't.
Very tricky, yeah.
Number 1 is preferred by me.
Okay, so that's where we're going?
Okay. Great.
Agreed.
All right, the next one, and I know I had said we were taking out everything on short-term rentals, and we do intend to do that, but there's one issue that I think this generated a lot of concern and comments, and that was whether or not accessory dwelling units, so just as a quick reminder, that would be a garden suite in your backyard or a basement apartment. It's limited in size and that type of thing. Whether those would be permitted to be used as short-term rental units. And similarly, whether an RV parked in someone's driveway could be rented out as a short-term rental. So I think really actually this should be option 1 and 2 combined should be the recommendation. The reason here is there's just a matter of timing. So what I'm proposing here is that we add, so we're not going to require permits for short-term regulations in the land use bylaw, but we will in the definitions we could include wording to say that an accessory dwelling unit and an RV are not suitable or acceptable as a short-term rental unit. And then when we get to drafting the licensing bylaw, I think we should replicate that language in there. If we don't go with option 1, the downside is that there will be a gap where you could build an accessory dwelling unit and we won't have those regulations for the short-term rentals in place.
Well, we shouldn't do much of anything until we adopt the regulations, really.
We have to put it in the bylaw.
Yeah.
If for example, if we did engagement around the licensing bylaw and opinions had changed, we could always come back and make an amendment to that. This is kind of a stopgap measure to get us until we have that bylaw in place. And like I said, this did receive significant concern. I think you'll see later there we have. And I know council received some emails about accessory dwelling units and density. And this doesn't solve that, but if we allow those to be short-term rentals, I'm confident we're going to see many more built much more quickly than if we restrict it to only long-term rentals or family staying there.
So you're recommending option 1?
Basically 1 and 2, I would say here combined as a.
Absolutely.
That works.
That's certainly the consensus.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Great. We're doing.
Next one, this one also was raised at VPAC and then also came up again at the public sessions. This was around an expansion or a potential expansion of the architectural control area. So the green that you see on the map there, the core village area, that's where our architectural controls apply. Or I should say the vast majority of them. There are a few in the outer area, but they are significantly reduced. So your pitch and all of those things are within the green area. We had calls basically for an expanded architectural control area from, it varied either Queen Street extension or King Street up to, but the consensus was basically that it would stop before reaching Zinc Road. So this would pick up the train station property as well as a number of residential properties along there. There were some comments made that, there are some historic or character homes that represent the character in that area. So that was something relatively new, I think. In terms of the options here, I guess there's a few things. We can certainly extend it. This area was not previously subject to tight controls around single unit and 2-unit homes. So the site, the Highway 3 streetscape plan regulations that were in place since 2011 that had those tight regulations don't apply to single and 2-unit homes. They only really were aimed more at the commercial uses to try to make commercial uses look more like our Pleasant Street commercial zone. I mean, that's an oversimplification, but so that's, I think, one point to note is that this would be sort of bringing new rules out here that hadn't been previously, but that's not to say that's a bad decision. It's not that we're losing those regulations with the change here. So in terms of the recommendations, my recommendation would be to maintain the existing boundary for the architectural area. But if council did want to consider an expansion, we could certainly do that. And I think there'd be a couple of ways to do that. The first would be to just take the area that's been identified. That would kind of create almost an island of architectural. So there'd be a band along Highway 3 that wouldn't be subject to those. Or the other option would be to expand it across Highway 3 and then include that area that was shown in red as well. That might have some impact on the R4 zone and some of the potential housing that we're looking to support and promote along North Street. So that's the thinking that's gone into my recommendation. I think it's valid to consider. It's not often that we hear a desire to increase those kind of regulations. I think we've heard it from at least several people. I wouldn't want to say we have a consensus from the residents in that area, but yeah.
Have we heard from the residents directly? I don't think they commented at the public meeting.
I know one resident who did raise it, who does live in the area, was in favor of it.
What was that?
Okay, Barry Redmond.
Right,
spoke
Barry,
in favor of that.
Yeah. That's Barry's area.
Yes, yeah.
I was thinking.
Well, his house and the train station, whatever.
Yeah.
But they're old homes.
So another option here would be to potentially, if we choose not to extend, would be to look at some of those properties for heritage registration and see if they were. I mean, some would already be registered, like the train station, but if there were others that we were looking to protect individual property. Now, the difference there is that doesn't get the whole streetscape, it gets the individual properties, but again, that's another option to consider.
I'm happy with the staff recommendation on that.
Okay. Staff recommendation?
Yeah, we probably will
Okay, great. All right, yes, so the next one is around shipping containers. So this was something, if council recalls, this came back to council, I think in January. It wasn't officially part of the plan review, but it was in between engagement periods. So Linda Flynn requested that council look in the draft to allow shipping containers that were fully clad with appropriate siding and roofing and doors to be looked at as any other structure, basically like an accessory structure. And that was in her case in support of the containerized agriculture piece. So This was raised as a concern a number of times, even with the the cladding materials that shipping containers shouldn't be permitted, or I think at the very least shouldn't be permitted within the green area that we just looked at, that architectural control area, that they should only be allowed out on Highway 3, even if they were clad with architecturally appropriate materials. So you'll see there's no staff recommendation here, because the options here are we could undo what we just did, which would not allow Ms. Flynn to do that, or there's a number of options in between. So we could say that even if they are appropriately clad, that they are only allowed in the outside the architectural area, and that.
Just explain to me, if they're clad and look like any other building,
I don't know. I can't answer that.
And I think you raised that in the public meeting. It's the discussion. It's similar to the discussions councils had in the past around mini homes and mobile homes, and so if they're stick built and they look like one, you can do it. But if they're brought in with wheels, we didn't allow it.
Right.
So there was conversation around that of what are we trying to achieve? Is it the aesthetic, or is it just that you don't want a shipping container? And if it's the aesthetic, then this would potentially deal with it, right? Having it clad.
If they didn't use a shipping container, they'd be allowed to build the structure.
That's right. Yeah.
That looks exactly.
That looks the same, 8 feet by 20 feet or by 40 feet. So the only
That's not the look they want, though.
Right, and that in option 4, which is something we've never explored, would potentially get into that. However, this would have wider impacts across the board on all construction, and that would be to look at some sort of a length to width ratio, because that would really stop. If that really is the issue, is the long and narrow, and not the fact that it's a shipping container under cladding, then something like that would apply to all structures. So that would mean, a wing of a house couldn't be long and narrow. It would have to all of a sudden we'd have to do some research to figure out what an appropriate ratio would be, and it would, I assume, have some, at some point you're going to be too long and too narrow, and that it has to get a little more.
But I think option 1 is an easy one to agree to, is it not?
That it would keep it out of the architectural area. Yeah.
Keep it out of the village.
I'm not sure that it, at the end of the day, I'm not sure that there's a great deal of logic to it, but there's no need to say that our rules have to be based on that. Just because if it's going to meet the architectural rules and then say, but it's only allowed outside of the architectural area, to me, there's a little bit of a break there. But absolutely, we could do it. 100%. That might be the compromise that would certainly allow the use to still happen, and definitely cut back on some of the comments that we heard with concerns about having them all.
So you can use it, but it has to meet the architectural controls. Is that what?
No, Councillor Wells was referring to option 1, which would say that it would still have to meet the architectural controls, but it wouldn't be allowed in the architectural control area.
Which makes sense.
I think that's okay. Just for example, where she wanted to put it is not within
That's
the
right.
architectural
So it would still
control.
allow her to carry forward as she had asked council to allow. Yeah, yeah.
So just for clarity,
Yeah, absolutely.
the way you said it, so the property that we made the change for is outside the architectural control area.
Right. She's allowed.
And so making the change that we're considering right now, saying it has to meet the architectural controls, that would be the only building outside the architectural control area that would have to meet architectural controls.
Right. And that's where I said that, there's a little bit of a logic,
Non-logic.
but
your house doesn't have to meet the architectural control of your building.
but your shipping container would, yeah.
I don't get the logic in that.
No, I wouldn't either. If it's under the architectural control area, it should be okay. Wouldn't you say? Container?
Yeah, I think option 1.
Option 1?
Is a necessity. I don't think we want to allow them in the core village area for sure. That's not
Oh, well, I don't know, you don't want them in the core area.
Yeah,
Which is
and
maybe
that's-
where the architectural controls.
And that is where, whether or not it makes, pure logic sense, maybe that's not the most important decision here. If it satisfies the majority of the wishes, then that may be the best decision.
Well, that's what land use is all about. Yeah.
I think I spoke out against using shipping containers even outside at the time, because I don't think it fits in personally, wherever it is, it's too close. And, I dismiss the idea that somehow the shipping containers in this particular application that came before council was for containerized farming, but there's nothing you can't, they're not magical boxes. If you can farm inside a container, you can farm inside any other structure that you build by yourself. So I don't accept the argument that this is a requirement if they wish to pursue farming. And frankly, we have plans, as I said once before in council, when it came before council, we have plans to expand our sewer up the old Trunk 3 in time, and there'll be a lot more residential development there, and I don't see that this is going to fit very well, having containers next door to you, especially if they are, if they're being used for farming, it's all the worse, because then they've got, compressors or who knows what making noise. It just doesn't seem to fit. I just don't see any place for shipping containers around Chester.
We've already allowed one.
So without being clad, there are some current regulations for shipping containers, and it's very limited the properties that they can fall within. It's all along the number 3, so all outside of the architectural area.
Yeah.
And even though they don't have to be clad, there's a number of other regulations that they have to be turned so that the narrow end faces the road. There has to be a fence, a 6-foot fence around them, and they have to be set back quite a ways from the highway. So right now, effectively, when you put all that together, there's only a handful of properties that could even keep a shipping container. And so yes, this would be sort of if you're going to dress it up, then you can put it in other places. That's kind of the thought with this whole issue.
The request that came from Ms. Flynn that we were considering was to refer it to plan review and include it in the regulation, so nothing's been permitted yet.
Yeah.
And it
Right. The direction was
discussed
to
that
allow
that
it,
would be part of the public hearing and part of this process, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So right now, we're kind of suggesting this is that within the architectural control area, they're just plain not going to be allowed.
Right. Yeah. And we can do that and then keep it as is.
That's what I'm hearing. Okay.
Would it be allowed in another structure?
Well, that was if it was fully within another structure, like a warehouse or something.
Put it inside a barn,
Right.
Whatever you want in a barn.
Yeah, and that would be, because typically the land use bylaw is only dealing with sort of the exterior and then the use of the property. So I think, if you had a large building and you could put a container in it, I don't think that would.
Well, that's just an item you own.
Right, it would be if you pulled in a boat on a trailer or a travel trailer. Yeah.
There's no question. What we heard is no shipping containers. All right, if we're prepared to look at a compromise to allow something outside the architectural zone, or just the other side of the number 3, it's another issue, but we're going to go by what we heard at the public meeting. There was a very strong consensus that shipping containers don't be allowed, period.
In the architectural control area. Well, that one's easy, that's.
Yeah, so if we allow them in the outside area, do they have to meet any requirements? Do they have to have siding on it? Do they have to have a pitched roof on them?
That's what we're saying.
That would be what option 1 would say, yes, that it would be, they would only be allowed outside the architectural area, but they would still have to be clad in the siding and.
Not look like a container.
Right.
And have a bit of a roof on it?
It have the roof and door, like a door that doesn't look like the shipping container doors.
Do they need a pitched roof though, or is it just they need roofing?
I think we just said roofing materials, so.
I think a pitched roof would be nice, but
Yeah, and we could, if that was
I just know that and it's not even in any controlled area, it's just general basic zoning but I know that I have two on the Windsor Road and they're very ugly and they're right there in front of you when you drive by. One's bright orange and one's bright blue.
Right.
And they're not attractive at all to the neighbors or anyone.
Right.
And they're big.
Yeah.
And they're go along the road like they're not on end. They're right there and, you know, they have something written on the side like they don't look well at all. I don't care what neighborhood.
And I mean, that's certainly an option too. I mean, we can say, you know, no containers whatsoever. I mean, that's.
So,
I don't know how you can dress them up. They're so big, they're so long.
And that would be a challenge we'll put to the person who wants to bring them in, you know, whomever that is.
I mean, maybe if they were half the size, but these are like the length of a huge flatbed or more. And I think everybody knows where they are in Windsor Road.
And I just hear you say that outside area that they have to be fenced in and face, that way in facing the road, so that's not a problem with the area we're talking about, right?
Yeah, so right now, and this is still within the village boundary, but basically along North Street, there is, so this is on the books today, there is an allowance for them and it comes with a big long list of stipulations and regulations that you have to have, yeah.
They wouldn't have that problem in lengthways, there's a fence around.
Right, so it would, yeah, it can get at some of those issues, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, like
Right.
the
If we allow them and regulate them, we can deal with at least some of those issues that you're speaking to, but.
Andre?
I have a shipping container.
I know lots of people.
I keep all kinds of tractor equipment and industrial things in there, but I'm not against the boundary of Chester. You know, that's the difference. I'm not on Windsor Road, you know, but I'm not against Chester. And if we know what Chester is, we know what we're trying to protect, we shouldn't be putting shipping containers near Chester. Simple. I don't care if they're clad or if they got a little roof on them or whatever, they're still shipping containers.
So we're in the village?
If
So
that's,
clarity.
yeah, I mean, if that's the direction that.
So this is the secondary planning strip and applies to a larger
Larger
village.
in the village.
And so what Councilor Pino is suggesting is within this planning area not to permit them, I think. And what I'm hearing is not in the village, in the architectural control area. So we just need clarity, I think.
Is it the entire village
plan area
or just the architectural?
Do any of the stores and commercial spaces have shipping containers outside to store stuff in?
Home Hardware is one?
I think they did. Yeah, I was gonna say, I think the quick way, and that's what the regulations were made for, and so that property is in compliance with, if you can picture the one out there, and you may not be able to, because it is kind of tucked away, that's,
Home
yeah.
Hardware did at one point, I don't
And I
know.
think yeah.
Well, I guess I just know that there are commercial people who get shipping containers dropped off.
Right.
And they stay there for X amount of time, and then they come get them, and then they bring a new full one.
Right.
I don't know how that all works.
well, we didn't extend the architectural zone to that area on number 3. We don't want shipping containers there. So it's got to apply to more than just the archetectural zone now.
Okay,
It's got to be beyond that.
so that would be the whole village plan
I mean,
then.
that would put it right next to Barry's backyard. He doesn't want one in his backyard.
Right.
Village plan area.
Yeah.
That's
So that would mean that for Linda, for Ms.
Right.
Flynn, that would mean that.
She can't.
She'd have to look at another property or put it in a different kind of structure. Okay, so we'd say, so that would be
So we're saying not.
no shipping containers in the village area. Now, existing ones that are legally in conformance, yeah, but otherwise, yeah,
Same as everything.
great.
So that's option 2 is what you're doing, I think, Garth, right? Remove the allowance for shipping containers to be considered
Basically,
as other structures if they are fully clad.
Yeah, so
In
just,
this planning area.
yeah, so we'll take out any allowance, there'll be basically a prohibition on shipping containers
Can
going
you,
forward.
just a question, speak to it, if you're a business, is it a way to tailor the bylaw that it has to be a commercial property?
That's how it is currently.
Okay.
The tight allowances that we have currently say it has to be used for basically non-residential storage purposes. Yeah, so that would be essentially commercial.
That's
So you're still allowed to do that?
Not with the direction we just
Well,
got.
that's what
So
I.
non-residential though it could be on a residential property and used as a shed.
Yeah, of course, I guess what I'm trying to get at is, are these, this would apply to permanent structures? I mean, or if the grocery store has a shipping container brought in,
Well, that's
and
what
it
I'm
sits there
right.
for 2 weeks until they have it unloaded.
That's what we're talking about, a shipping container. So when it touches the ground,
It's
it's,
a shipping container.
yeah.
Well, surely don't apply if they need a permit. We're talking about permanent things. You don't need a development permit for something, then then we're not controlling it.
Everything that's not permitted is prohibited.
Now, we were saying you need a development permit, take an offload.
No, I think what we'd be saying.
Be careful what we're doing here, because people may get loads dropped off.
Well, and there's a difference between if it's staying on the truck or if it's being put on the ground.
See, so we can't, I think we're trying to control structures that are intended to be permanent or at least semi-permanent.
Well, people are using something that's not a structure as a structure. That's basically what it is, yeah.
Something that's meant to be mobile, it's here and it's gone.
And then I don't think it would be coming off the truck chassis in that case.
I don't know, I don't know.
Well, I know that.
It could, it could take a while.
But the independent drop the, I guess, the
Like a
container, or it's probably on wheels, but they leave it there maybe for, it's been there 2 weeks with
Yeah.
whatever on
Well,
it.
that's, I guess.
And both grocery stores do that, so with that,
So that's why we had the rules the way they were, with is that out on the number 3, they're different. We just heard that we don't want shipping containers, so this is what this is exactly what we're discussing, yeah.
Andre and then Adele.
I'll just say that the grocery store example, those are those are trailers.
Yeah.
They have wheels, they're just being unloaded, and that's not what we're talking about.
And we already have language about vehicle storage in vehicles being prohibited, so I think if that became a permanent thing, we would be able to deal with it.
That discussion clouds the issue here. The issue is, using shipping containers as a building. And that's what we're discussing.
No, I get the part
Are they
of the building,
appropriate?
but
Yes
it's
or
just
no,
bringing
check the
everything
box.
to you.
Is there any reason we might want to consider, not in residential, but certain conditions that could be allowed in commercial?
And that was my point, because I know that, say for instance, Home Hardware decides to buy a trailer load of, or a container load of lawn tractors and, has a sale like Canadian Tire does from time to time. And for that product, and it sits on the property, well, what we're proposing, they won't be allowed to do that. I just don't want to hamper a business. That's.
Kurt, it does, Councillor, you're right, it clouds the issue a little bit and it makes it a bit more challenging discussion. Is there something in the bylaw that allows for temporary use kind of stuff? That would be considered as a temporary use? Because the challenge you have is if you try to deal with every situation like that, like offloading it, will create unintended consequences if we're trying to deal with it like that. So what you'll get is somebody pulling in, if we say, well, it has to have wheels on it, you'll get somebody who then says, well, it's got wheels, it's there for 8 months and we're dealing with it. So I think we're better to keep it clean, and if we have an issue, to deal with those one-off issues.
And again, on some of this, I might defer to our development officer and our solicitor, because we already have rules on the books that say no storage in vehicles. So if them parking a vehicle there overnight is storage in vehicles, we've already got enforcement issues. You know what I mean? Like, there's a point when regulations meet reality. So in terms of temporary uses, I don't know if those would currently cover what we're speaking of, but we absolutely could add wording to say that this does not include, unloading, that kind of thing within, and figure out some wording that would set out a reasonable expectation. So it wouldn't be 8 weeks, but if it was 24 hours, maybe that's,
Well, we're trying to control structures that are either permanent or semi-permanent.
Correct.
Not things that are going and coming.
Yeah.
No, but nobody's taking shipping containers off trucks and putting them on the ground
That's
if
what
you're
I'm
not
saying.
planning to keep them there for a while.
Agreed.
That's a lot of work.
I agree.
So just get rid of this idea that we're going to use shipping containers for putting frozen meat in. We're not going to do it.
okay, that sounds,
We can still take a look at the so we have So we do, okay, so temporary, so we have a number of provisions on temporary structures, including which, if it's incidental to construction, you can't have a shipping container there for a limited period of time, as long as it's related to the construction that's being undertaken.
Yeah, well, I guess that's all I'm trying.
The same with the construction sign, that says this is being done by so-and-so. We don't, so we have several of those covered. That said, we can make sure that we get some wording in there so that we're not interfering with, the regular loading and unloading of commercial businesses.
So we're gonna restrict them completely within this area.
Yes. You just brought something up, and I know it's a little slightly outside the scope, but the construction one, is there a time period on that?
And there is, I think it's 6 months,
Okay.
I believe, yeah.
Yeah, we don't want a 10-year
No, yeah.
No.
construction project.
We have those in the village now.
Yeah.
Yeah, no more than 6 months from the issue of a temporary permit. So they need to get a temporary permit for that, in that case, for that.
The property that we're talking about as far as the proposal,
Yes.
is that commercially zoned or is it split zoned?
Oh, where she wanted to put the garden?
Yeah,
I can't.
that's where the old
Yeah.
Imperial Oil container.
I don't recall. I'm not sure offhand. Apologize. Actually, I guess I can zoning map. It's proposed to be in the residential 4 zone.
It is.
Yes. And that was, yeah.
Are they requesting a rezoning of that? Or is that a permit?
She was requesting that as part of plan review, we enable the use. That's what she was requesting. So that was where we brought in these the newer allowance, and it hasn't actually been drafted yet, but the intent based on the previous direction was to allow what we were going to deem a commercial agricultural use by development agreement, and that would have been permissible in that zone. So it probably wouldn't need to be rezoned.
Wouldn't need to go commercial.
Right. Yeah.
So we're gonna prohibit them as permanent structures and deal with the.
Yeah, no shipping containers in the village boundary, and make sure that we have some language in there to say that commercial unloading within a reasonable timelines is allowed to continue. Great, okay.
Very nice.
Excellent. Alrighty. The next one, and this was one that we didn't hear a whole lot of feedback on, but there was a couple in particular. So we had added in some landscaping provisions, basically to say that you can't use stone or aggregate to completely replace a lawn or other kind of softscaping. And softscaping includes like garden beds or trees or shrubs or natural vegetation. So it's not purely lawn. We heard some comments that in terms of places, Chester having water concerns, that, requiring a lawn that needs to be watered is not a good decision. And my counter to that is we don't require a lawn, and we certainly don't require you to water it. And this is one where I do feel that this is a character piece, that the look of that aggregate, well, it can be done very nicely, is definitely outside of what we're used to seeing here in Chester Village, and it generally wouldn't be, I think, seen as
trying to create green space which helps with the recovery of water.
right. And I think again that there's under no circumstances this council requiring somebody to water their plants or their lawn. So I don't think that's quite a fair argument in this case. So my recommendation here would be to maintain our existing regulations, which is that a portion of the lawn has to be done in softscaping, and you've got a variety of options for that.
I'm going to disagree with you on that one.
Okay.
Sorry, I usually agree with you.
No.
But to prohibit it, I think is a little heavy-handed. What Nancy and David have done is first class. And if you do it that way, what's wrong with that instead of putting grass? I just think you know, give people the option of doing it. I don't like the prohibition. I just think that's a little too heavy-handed.
Andre?
I don't like aggregates. Take a drive down Glen Allen Drive in Bridgewater. It's hideous.
No, I get it, but
You can't control people's tastes. What I know is that, you know, those who went before us, they did not cover their properties in aggregates.
that's a choice. That was a choice. It wasn't a regulation
The
set.
historic character of Chester is
Which is what we're
not to
trying to-
cover your properties with aggregates. It's gardens and softscapes, and that's the character of Chester. It's not, let's turn this into a hospital parking lot. So, you know, I'm very opposed to seeing aggregates permitted in the village. I think it's regressive, and it makes us look like it's too commercial. And, you know, and if we allow some sort of open door like subjectivity thing, that makes it hard for the development officer to determine
Yeah, somebody who's doing a good job.
who's gonna do a nice job of their stone garden versus the next guy that just covers it in pink aggregate from some quarry somewhere, and it looks like Bridgewater.
Yeah, I think
That's the last place we want to look like.
Yeah. It'll be extremely difficult to control the quality of what you're doing if you're like.
Quality, absolutely, yeah. One of the options here, you know, if there was a desire to, we could state a percentage of the lot that could be covered with aggregate as a compromise. But in terms of the quality, what it looks like, what color the stone is, no, we're not going to be able to get into that. Yeah.
Now, there's gonna be little walkways and pathways and all that stuff, that's all normal. You could put some low amount, like 10% or something like that, I could tolerate that. But, you know, people,
Just allow it.
I just don't like it. There's this idea that somehow you can get away with not maintaining your yard, you don't have to mow your grass if you get rid of all the grass and put stones down. Well, eventually that gets filled with weeds, and then it's worse yet.
Well, what do we require people to mow their grass?
No, but.
So,
But, you know, this idea that you have to water your lawn and that somehow is gonna take from the water supply, that's an absurd argument anyway, because all you're doing is putting the water back in the ground. So, that,
It seems so inconsistent. I mean, there's so much effort being put into trying to preserve the architectural character and historical character of the village, that why are you doing it on one hand, and the next hand you're letting them take it away?
I agree. You know, we want to ban vinyl siding, but let's put the whole yard in.
Yeah,
aggregate.
that all in
That
cement.
should be fine.
well, let's use number 3.
The percentage doesn't really bother me, because I
Some
get that.
small amount, because you're gonna need some for your pathways
One
and.
walkway to your house doors.
We don't want to, you know, we don't want to make it absurd that they have to use, you know, they can't put a path to their door from their driveway.
Yeah. The way it's worded now would allow pathways, but we could absolutely set out a percentage if that gave a greater level of comfort.
No, we don't need them for lawns. I think this allows people to have if they wanted a stone walkway or even a
Yeah,
rock wall.
the language in there now says, to not replace softscaping. For greater clarity, the use of bare dirt, gravel, stone, or other aggregate material is not an acceptable replacement for softscape areas and shall not contribute to the requirement for landscaping. So that would certainly allow pathways, but it wouldn't allow you to generally replace what would be.
Good.
Yes.
Do we make a distinction with landscaping and, say, driveways and pathways and stuff like that? Conceivably.
Well, obviously, your driveway can't be long.
No, I'm just thinking, but you could, like, have a very large driveway.
Yeah, we actually, that's one, we don't have a stipulation on driveway width or
No.
dimensions. That's something we haven't previously.
No, I could have, I'd say, I'd want to park 4 vehicles side by side in front of my house.
Right.
Are we controlling it?
Yeah.
I want gravel or pavement or stone.
Yeah, you're right. Currently, the bylaw is silent in that area in terms of specific to driveways. Yeah.
But do we have a requirement for softscaping?
Yeah, so the development shall incorporate landscaping elements into the design, including but not limited to trees, shrubs, garden beds, softscape, i.e. grass lawn areas, and the retention of healthy existing
So
vegetation.
one way or the other, you have to have some.
Yeah, you have to have some of that, yeah. It's just not spelled out into like a
Well, it's
percentage.
really complicated to try to spell it in numbers, really.
No, I think it's good.
Just leave it as it is.
So Derek.
Derek, what do you think, Derek?
Well, I'd like number 3, set a percentage, but to have an outright prohibition in aggregate doesn't make any sense to me.
I mean, in the
No, I can see some.
provision not located in the front yard, you could live with that.
So perhaps the use of prohibition
That might be
is,
wrong.
a bit of a misnomer
It is,
there.
that's a.
Because what Garth has read is what we currently have isn't a prohibition.
Yeah.
It's a prohibition for using it for softscaping. So you would be allowed to use aggregate for like a walkway or something like that. It doesn't completely prohibit the use of it. It prohibits it in terms of replacing it for all your softscaping.
That's a good point. Yeah, that word is probably not
The wrong.
not the right word to use there, based on the way it's worded in the bylaw.
Number one then.
Read it again. so-
Yeah. Okay. So this is in the architectural provisions along with everything else. So the development shall incorporate landscaping elements into the design, including but not limited to trees, shrubs, garden beds, softscape, grass lawn areas, and retention of healthy existing vegetation. For greater clarity, the use of bare dirt, gravel, stone, or other aggregate material is not an acceptable replacement for softscape areas and shall not contribute to the required landscaping on the lot. So it actually does, in some ways, allow it. It just doesn't.
Still not sure what it means.
Well, throw out a number and do it.
No,
I mean, if that would, we could easily say shall not exceed 10%, 15%. If that
Just
was,
so we can move it along, I think we have a sense of that council doesn't want to completely ban the use of gravels and aggregate. I think you could work with the solicitor to come up with some appropriate wording that would still allow the use of it incorporated within
it
those.
could even get more descriptive and say, so trails and things
The
are,
general sense of what.
Yeah, because even if you use percentage, I mean, depending on the size of your lot, I mean.
right,
If
you
you've got
can put it all together.
But if you have a driveway and it's going to your garage and it's going to walkway to your house, I mean, how do you determine what percentage is required
Right.
in every circumstance?
Number one suits me. I think we're just making more work.
Yeah, just, but get some clarity around that.
Yeah, to allow
Yeah.
paths and driveways.
Yeah. Okay, we only have 10 minutes left to, well, then we'll have to.
We're getting pretty close, I think. Okay, so the next one was, we've kind of touched on it already, but so just overall concern with the use of different materials, architectural controls. So we've heard this before. There was requests to establish some form of what I would dub a design review committee, which would be made up of citizens to consider applications and determine whether the design and architectural features are appropriate. So that would be, for example, if we had chosen with the vinyl option to say, as long as it looks like a traditional material,
We just
that
eliminated.
I know, but those kind of items potentially would be the sorts of things that you would maybe send to this committee hypothetically to review. So just a couple of notes here before we get to the options. The way this was pitched or was being thought of, I think with the community, was that this would happen, of course, prior to development or building permits being issued, was that, whether the design was appropriate. Like I said, we would absolutely need clarity in terms of what level of development would be going to this committee. And another option that would not satisfy exactly what we heard, but might work towards this, would be to look at expanded heritage registration. And so you'll see on the options here. Option one would be to basically pursue that request. So we would research, and I had potentially mistakenly in the past when this had come up in the public said that I didn't think there was authority to do that under the MGA. I am not positive that there is, but I've taken another look and I think that it may be open to that if there was a desire. There's fairly broad basis for council to form committees and those kind of things. So it might be possible. We just have to figure out the regulatory framework and how it all works. And it would absolutely have to come before development permits, because once a permit is applied for, we have legislative timelines that start to kick in and those kind of things. So if there was a desire for that, we would need to do some research, and I'd work with Sam, of course, to figure out sort of a terms of reference and how that might work. Option 2, just real.
Can I ask a question? How does, like the town of Bridgewater, how do they do a lot of heritage control? How do you know how that's undertaken exactly?
I'm not intimately familiar, but I don't know that they have a heritage conservation district, so I would suspect it's all done through their heritage advisory committee, but I don't know.
They have some sort of heritage officer as an employee of the town.
I know
I'm not
that-
sure how that.
I'm a little more familiar with the town of Lunenburg, and they similar.
Is that what it just,
Oh.
what did I say?
Bridgewater.
Bridgewater.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that's the last thing I want. Bloomberg.
Yes, you're right, yes. So they do have they have obviously the UNESCO designation, and they have Heritage Conservation District in place for sort of the old town.
Right.
And they do have a heritage, that's essentially, that would be kind of like, sort of maybe option 2 here, if we sought to do this kind of thing through a heritage lens. And so my understanding is in Lunenburg, you would first apply to the heritage officer for, I think it's called a certificate of appropriateness or something along those lines. And then if you get that, that means you've met the guidelines and the design controls, and then you use that, you need that in order to then apply for your development permit and subsequently your building permit. I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but and in that case, it is a staff person with the town who's reviewing, someone who's trained in heritage planning and architectural, and reviewing their documents and then making a decision as to whether that's gets its certificate of appropriateness.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, so that would be kind of like option 2. If if there was a desire to do this, we could seek to do it through our existing Heritage Advisory Committee, and we've talked about this before. If we wanted to seek expanded heritage registrations, or there are also examples of places that have had regulations put in for properties that are adjacent to heritage properties. They're not as tight, but they're to say basically that those properties also need to be reviewed to make sure they're not going to detract from the property that's in the neighborhood, kind of thing. Option 1 would be to go full bore down what we heard. Option 2 would be sort of a compromise to use our existing committee, but maybe look to expand the coverage. And then option 3 would be, make no changes and don't pursue.
You're recommending 3?
There's no recommendation here. I think there are. Personally, yeah, I think I probably would if I was forced to.
It's pretty complicated for anybody trying to do anything. It would take a lot more staff resources.
Yes, yeah.
Delay construction.
Delay construction.
Potentially.
We're just in the process of trying to speed up the process of approvals.
And that would really hinge on what we were sending to that committee. Again, I think if it was really limited to like, is this vinyl siding appropriate? And then the homeowner knew, well, if you choose vinyl, you're going to be delayed because you're going to go through this process. Maybe that would be a little more fair. Right, exactly. And I know I keep using that example because that's right. So.
Option 3.
Yeah, committees are just another layer to me, but anyway, yeah.
3 is what I'm hearing.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, we might get through one more little item before we have to do our 10 o'clock appointment.
Okay. So the next one, this is around the commercial uses in the marine development zone. So just as a quick reminder, the marine.
Never get through that.
Never get through
Okay.
that.
Maybe we revisit this one.
Let's take that off the agenda.
Okay. We got a simple one there somewhere?
Yeah, okay, we can just go to the next one. So there were, and this is a sort of a general consent or a general issue that we've had raised with the document since draft 1, not new this time, just around concerns with increased density in the core of the village. I think both from a water use perspective and also from a character perspective. I think we heard both. So there were some calculations and statements made at one of the meetings and also included in this package that made a valid attempt to try to put all the changes together along with the number of lots in the village and calculate the change. With respect, there were some errors in those calculations. There was several items were missed from the existing plan, and so what was presented as being the impact of the change is actually, in my mind, significantly less when you go through those numbers. For example, one thing that was noted was that in the R2 zone, or the Central Village zone, currently, 1 2-unit dwelling is allowed every 90 meters. And in the new plan, every lot can have a 2-unit dwelling. What was missed is that in the current plan, any house that was built before 2004 can also be turned into a 2-unit. And it's irregardless of whether it's right next door to one of those other. So the effect of that is that almost every property can have a 2-unit today. And so
Even under the existing
rules. So that was, and it's a nuance in the bylaw, so no fault to the folks who were doing these numbers, but it was presented as the CBR zone would be tripling the density, when in fact, truthfully, it's 1 more unit per lot is potentially what's allowed by this plan. So there were a few of those.
The impact isn't as great as people understood.
Right, and so I think it's important to respectfully present the other side of that as well. Similarly, or along the same lines, we had calls for just no increase in density until there's water, and then again, ongoing concerns with water supply about these new units. If we, in order to respond to those, really, and so just at a high level, if we're talking about the estate zone, the R1 zone, there's no change in density there. They allow second dwelling units today. We're allowing second dwelling units in the plan. So 2 now, 2 in the new plan. In the R2 zone, like I mentioned, 2 allowed now in virtually all cases, 3 allowed in the new plan. And so really, if council wants to pull back on the increased density in this plan, the low-hanging fruit is the accessory dwelling unit. That's what we've proposed in every zone, to allow 1 accessory dwelling unit if you can meet the requirements. So if council were to say remove that, that would have the impact of actually lessening the density to what's allowed under the current plan today. Similarly, with options 2 and 3, those would be actually going a step back. And that's not to say that's the wrong decision. It's not always to say that it has to be progression. But I just wanted to make that note that the current plan that's been in place since 2004 has allowed, like I said, 2 units on most properties.
Like you're saying, if we remove the accessory dwelling units from bylaw, that's actually less density.
We would actually end up with the potential for less units because of the change to the estate or the R1 zone as well, right? So my recommendation in this case is to make no changes. I think we've got a good balance here, and I know people will argue with me on that, but I think that where we're at is reasonable. But anyway,
Yeah, it's one of the contentious issues, but certainly there's a big desire to be able to put Natty Suite in your house if you want. We've eliminated the short-term rental of those.
right.
So we've made some changes. I'm going to recommend 4. I think I agree with the staff recommendation.
And thank you, Councilor Wells. That's a good point. I think also with the decision we made earlier to not allow those for short-term rentals, I think that's an important piece to this too. It doesn't cut down on the total potential number of units, but I do think it will affect the timeline for that full build-out. And maybe that some folks just will choose not to do it at all.
Some people won't do it.
Right. Okay, great. Now we're gonna.
Okay, we're gonna
take a break.
You're gonna take a break.
Okay.
I don't know about anybody else. But we're gonna move on to our 10 o'clock appointment. Beth and Danny Burgoyne. Yeah, come on up.
So I'm to sit, am I?
Sure.
Am I permitted to sit?
Be comfortable.
All right. Okay, good morning, councillors. We're Beth and Danny Burgoyne and members of the public. Thank you for allowing us the time. I'm going to stand. Thank you for allowing us the time to express our ongoing concerns regarding our property access. I think you've all read the forerunner. Yeah. Property taxes and lack of services provided, as well as the denial of a civic number by the Chester municipality. These in entirety degrade our property values. I'm sure you would all agree to that, but that's how we feel. First, I would like to address access. Controlled access is designated by the Department of Transportation because we are on the other side of the 103.
Yeah.
I'm not, what's the directional term? Western side. I'm not very good at directions. As a result of the construction of the 103 decades past, property owners lost safe and legal access to their lands either by expropriation or the controlled access designation. Not all landowners were inflicted with this burden. For example, Hubbards and Hebbville have leniency. If you know down by the Hubbards exit Queensland, there were cottages, garbage pickup, but since the twinning of the 103, they have put in a little access road. So actually the 103, what makes certain areas controlled access over other areas not controlled access, I'm not sure. But because they have leniency, but in our area we are controlled access. Since then, there has been nothing put in place to mitigate this restriction. There was an attempt decades ago when I spoke with Reed Lonis at the Department of Transportation when we decided to build our cottage. He said, yes, I recall that. I think it was prior to 2000. There was an attempt to put a road in from Beach Hill Road. Would any of you recall that? And I don't know if it was change of government or what happened, but it was squashed. Do you remember?
Well,
do you know the reason?
Peter Fitz was looking after the highway shed at that time.
Okay.
And he was involved in attempting to do that.
Yeah, and according to Reed Lonis, he said, something will be put into place because they will be eventually twinning. And I said, well, maybe not in my lifetime. He said, no. He said, I think it will be. So we'll see. So there was an attempt made, but nothing came to fruition. Properties for sale along the stretch of 103 have notations in their property descriptions. Controlled access or accesses from the 103, which is not legal to turn off at this time. This can be confirmed by Viewpoint property listings online. In fact, there was a property, in fact, there was a property up for sale. And the fellow, Peter Mosier, who purchased our home in Oakland, he was interested in buying a piece of woodland. And we said, there's a piece not far from us. And his realtor discouraged him and said, no, don't buy that. You can't go in off the 103. So, having said that, it's quite a burden. We are dealing with a double-edged sword. If it is controlled, then why have property owners continue to enter and exit their lands without penalty? Because they have no other access. Dwayne Collicutt owns 69 acres bordering the 103 in front of our acreage that we have our cottage on. He logged the land, which entailed heavy forestry equipment to enter and exit the land from the 103 without incident. Wayne Millett, he entered and exited many times with a crew to collect merchantable Christmas trees from both the previous owner, Lewis Bond, and ourselves. The Department of Transportation, every winter, they use that entrance of where we are to turn their snow plows. So they're coming in off, going across the 103 and going back. I know it's their property, however, it's still the concern of access. Municipality of Chester, the building inspectors, they've come back to visit us several times to do their property inspections. Able Engineering has been back for the same site inspections and approvals. So the list is endless for us, and I'm sure the same for the property owners along that stretch. As you are probably thinking, and I am aware that these concerns are for the Department of Transportation. However, these claims fall in your jurisdiction. Many landowners, including ourselves, are being negatively impacted by our access. Is it not time that someone, perhaps you, our councillors, take the initiative and present a proposal to have a safe and legal access road constructed? Well, I'm not talking the 401, I'm just talking a road to come in that's a graveled road, something to take away the negativity of this controlled access for all of us along that stretch for many, many miles. In turn, this would legitimize some of the taxes we are paying. As it stands, we are overassessed and taxed with little to no services. So to continue with property taxes, as mentioned in our correspondence correspondence, to council dated April 18th, we did appeal our taxes in 2022. Property Valuation Services, as stated on their notice of assessment, uses mass appraisal methods. So I don't really think they take into consideration people who are living off-grid with bare bones amenities and living conditions. When I spoke to a representative, I do not think they fully understood that this property is truly off-grid. No Nova Scotia Power to rely on, which I might add, does not charge us a fee as they cannot provide us with the utility. Unlike the fee and or tax we are charged for waste collection and disposal by our municipality, and to date never rendered. Because you're not allowed to stop, apparently, on the 103. So we're being charged for garbage collection and disposal.
Where do you take it to get it picked up?
We have another property, 6046.
Well, I guess I say that because I'm in the same place. I have a camp out in Lacey Mines Road.
Yeah.
You couldn't get to anything other than bulldozer.
Yeah,
you know.
no, and for us, we have 4 PIDs that we pay for garbage collection. 3 have garbage collection that actually go by and would do it. This one does not. Okay. We are basically self-sufficient without conveniences and amenities privy to others. We are green all the way, reducing environmental impact. After all, isn't that what our levels of government are aspiring to? If we go the extra mile to live in the manner we do, by choice, because I'm not, saying that it's not by choice, it definitely is. I question, what is the equation for property taxes? What are we paying for? The land use and property values on our stretch of the 103 comprises primarily forestry resource and 2 cottages. Now, I only went down as far as Western Shore. I know there are other cottages in there. And 2 cottages, one being ours, assessed at $246,000, capped at $168,200. And they're not finished with us yet because we don't have our occupancy permit. So my fear is it's going to just go up because, it's a new build. And 5 lots down, there's another cottage, assessed at $94,100, capped at $51,300. The majority of the land along that route is raw or forestry resource land, valued or assessed at $1,000 to $10,000 plus per lot, displaying inconsistencies across the board in both acreage and assessment. The ratios do not add up, and I have a list of them here that I researched. Just down from us, July 10th of last year, a cottage with 24.8 acres sold for $55,000. It was assessed at $3,100. And I don't know how long it was there. You can go on Viewpoint and look at it. But I mean, there's something awry going on there. To further this argument, if you peruse land assessment and taxes on Highway number 3 in Gold River, which benefit from all of the municipal services and amenities, not to mention the panoramic ocean views, I have found numerous properties, not eyesores, assessed well below $200,000 and capped not much over $100,000. So they're right on the road with no controlled access. Where is the justification for valuation on our property without services, proximity to amenities, not to mention lengthy response time by fire departments or other emergency services if they can even locate us? Lastly, we would like to address the denial of a civic number by the municipality, letter dated March 12, 2024. I don't know if you were able to access a copy of that. Again, as mentioned in our correspondence of April 18th, this is a major concern not only for us, but all landowners. Every property owner, regardless of their location, should be entitled to a civic number in the event of an emergency. Regardless of the property being residential, commercial, industrial, forestry and a resource or other, a landowner's property should be easily located. This is discriminating. You can have a civic number, but you cannot have a civic number, and we're all paying taxes. Why? Why should controlled access have a negative impact on a landowner's location and identification? Think of all the signage currently along the 103. Why not civic numbers? Even if it's not the conventional civic number system, even if it starts at 1 and goes right up through, just something on a tree to locate people. People have the right to be located if necessary. Put yourself in our position. How would you react? In closing, it is our hope that Council will not take these concerns lightly. It is impacting more landowners than just ourselves. Perhaps some have previously come forward to express the above concerns. Only you, Council, would have recollection of that. Well, I don't know if anybody has come forward or if it's...
No, I don't recall.
No?
I don't recall it, but.
Well, good, then I'll be the first. We intend to forge ahead and are hopeful for positive resolutions. We need a safe and legal access to our properties on the 103, as well as a form of location identification. Assessments and taxes need to be adjusted based on location and services provided. Until these changes are made, our properties are of little value on the market, which should be reflected in our assessments and taxes. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. I don't even know where to start. I mean,
I know, there's a lot in there, and I deviated from your original letter.
Well, the problem is, I mean, your access is a Department of Transportation issue.
That's right.
Can we bring it up with the Department of Transportation next time we meet with them? Yes, we can.
Okay, that would be
Can
perfect.
I fix it? I don't know. Only they can.
I will take it up with them because this isn't the first time.
But I mean, yes, we can at least discuss the
Yes,
issue.
okay.
That I can say I can do.
All right.
The other ones, the assessed value, we do not establish the assessed value.
Yeah, and I don't mean to interrupt you, Warden Weber,
Yes.
but I have spoken to Property Evaluation Services. Property Evaluation Services turns me over to the municipality. The municipality turns me back to Property Evaluation Services. We're a registered farm. I asked them if we could be a registered farm there because we have all of our Christmas greenery there. No, it's a cottage. When I envision a cottage, I think of a lovely wharf, lake, ocean, speedboats, relaxation. There's none of that back where we are. It's work for survival. Cutting firewood, stoking wood stoves, using a cooler in the winter because we can't generate enough solar power in the winter for a refrigerator, and on and on. So I don't know what to do.
No, I'm not sure I do. I mean, like I said before, I have a camp. I don't have any solar power. I don't have anything.
No.
Whatever. Kerosene,
It's all battery
lamp,
lights.
stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm taxed.
Yes.
And there's no question about it.
Right.
But I don't understand why property valuation tells you they determine the value of property.
Exactly.
I do not.
Exactly. However, you must have control over us being charged for waste collection and disposal.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
So maybe we can resolve that.
But like, I pay it on my.
But you shouldn't be if they don't collect it.
We need bring it out and take it home.
Yeah, I know, but that's not right. There's no equality in the people who are having theirs picked up roadside. And perhaps if I didn't have a property in Gold River, we would have to drive to Kaiser Meadow or do something that was environmentally unethical. Dig a hole back on our land and bury it, which is illegal.
Well, if you had the public access point, I mean, in many private roads and things, we put boxes at the end of for people.
That's right.
But
They do that at Sherbrooke Lake.
I can't do it where you are.
No, that's correct. But there should be something. What about at exit 9? Have a garbage collection box.
Well, we used to, actually.
And another thing, if the Department of Transportation plows can turn in our driveway and cut across the 103, the garbage truck is not much larger, I do not think.
Well, they won't allow us to do it. So
No, I know. But anyway, something needs to be done, and I will keep forging ahead until I see some resolutions and results.
And I know garbage collection is charged on woodlots.
Oh, charged on everything.
It is.
Yeah.
I know, because on mine.
Yeah.
Even though there's no cottage there, it's just the woodland.
Mm-hmm.
The solid waste rate isn't just for garbage collection, it's for disposal. We don't charge a tipping fee for residents at the
No.
landfill, so that's part of, you generate waste on properties, that's part of the theory behind a solid waste rate, is that it's charged to all properties because they could all generate some sort of waste that ends up in our landfill. We don't charge residents a tipping fee, so that is part of the payment there, so.
If she doesn't have a stamp yet,
So Della was that, or? No.
That's,
Sorry, I interrupted.
That's okay.
I was just wondering, what is it? What is it now? Is it forest resource or what is it? What is it now?
Forest resource, but then property valuation services carved out an acre, and that is designated as the cottage. Yeah,
residential.
yes, residential. Yeah.
And Della, what did you?
Yeah, thanks for you obviously done your homework, Beth. And I understand the garbage issue, but my biggest concern is your safety issue.
Mine too.
That's my concern, and I know our policy is not to give a civic number to someone across the 103, but I mean, there's gotta be a way around that. I mean, if something happened and nobody responded because they couldn't find it, I mean, that's, to me, I know the garbage issue is important to you, but for me, the safety issues that you pointed out makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, and I mean, that goes for people on their woodland, if they're cutting firewood or anything. You know, where are you?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm on one side of the 103. I can't give you a description.
You know, and I'll be honest with you, I don't know all the rules and regulations associated with how or why we don't issue a civic number, so I want staff to give us some information on that.
I think that's, I really feel very important.
You know, so maybe they can give us a little advice on how we may pursue any of this, but the civic number is definitely us, that again. You know, so,
Yeah,
so
okay.
you know.
And I know several people that do live across, off the grid, not where Beth lives, but across, that have probably the same issue. They don't have a civic number. But,
No.
I
I don't
mean,
even know if I had one at the
because if something happened to them across there and they're not very
Well,
far
that's
away.
right, that's right.
I think you get a civic
yeah.
number when you get a building permit, is the policy there, because I know, well, residents of my community, when they have a permit to build a home, a civic number is assigned to that resident, so I don't understand why.
I think you would need a staff person.
Yeah, I don't understand that quite frankly myself. I think I have one at my camp, mind you, I have a legal access.
Right.
Even though
Yeah.
you can go ahead and turn that if you want to.
But I mean, even to reference the letter from the municipality, Sylvia Dixon, your own solicitor said, you know, the access, no, don't provide a civic number. EMO, they were not in favor of it because of vehicular access. So that raises the question again of taxes. If we are that, have all of these negative issues surrounding our property, why are we taxed so much? Who is going to ever buy it with that burden?
Do you have any legal access to your property?
No. We bought it from Lewis Bond. In fact, the property that Wayne Collicutt had in front of us, we had a right-of-way going into our back 55 acres. We bought it from him 3 years after the purchase of the one from Lewis Bond. Since then, our daughter owns it, so we still have the right-of-way in. But Lewis Bond lived directly across, to the best of my knowledge, the 103, and he used to just come up across and go to his land. But that wasn't transferred. I think it's G&C who bought the property. That wasn't transferred when we purchased the property because, to be quite honest with you, there was no issue. It was never mentioned about, oh, it's controlled access, you can't turn in. And now, all of a sudden, it's blossomed into, when we wanted a civic number. So, and getting back to the garbage issue, I begrudge paying a fee that we are not having any collection. We're not even in the zone to have collection. Yes, we can take it out to our other property. Yes, we can take it to Kaiser Meadow, but there's no equality there with other property owners.
Well, everybody pays garbage tax.
I know, but they shouldn't if the service is not available. Really, honestly. If you went to a grocery store and looked at an item and walked out without the item and they charged you for it, you know, it's the
But if you
same
produce
analogy.
waste, it has to get to our landfill somehow.
It does, and it goes through our other property. So we're paying 2 garbage disposals for 2 people.
You're producing garbage at your cottage.
That's it.
It costs us money to bury it.
Right, and we are paying it on our other property.
That's what the garbage.
So we're
that we
paying
produce
twice. We're paying twice.
there. Okay, well, I'm not sure, whatever.
But many property owners they have a wood lot and then they have a residential home.
Right.
They're also paying garbage
But they
tax.
shouldn't be.
But that was our
Cottages
policy
on
that we
lakes.
put it on.
But why? Why? I mean, that is unethical, to be charging for a service that you're not getting.
Okay, we have a variety of
Okay.
issues here.
Are we-
We'll get
I
staff
will
to give us
sit down.
some advice on what can and cannot be done.
And will you get back to me?
Yes, we will in some fashion.
When the report comes on to the council agenda, you'll be notified.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nothing simple. Okay. Jonathan McGee. I'm running a little late, but you know.
Do you want to take 5 minutes?
Well, it's just that as soon as he's done, we're taking a break.
I was told to bring my laptop for a PowerPoint because I couldn't transfer a file through Dropbox or through any other sort of web sharing. So I have Flash drive with me as well, and I have that.
Okay, so you want to put that.
I do.
You guys got Dropbox? People could just drop you things or WeTransfer, any of those things. You could get them.
Yeah.
And then you're free, so it would be easy for me to do that. Oh, this is awesome. Why would you do that?
Yeah, and then if you just go into like your file, it'll just
My biggest concern is
So what do you want?
just is there like a setting?
It's going to be Finder.
Yeah, and then it's just on the first side.
Because all we have to
Especially for Mac, if you just double click that, and then it'll do a quick little load on the top here, and then you just have to set.
I'm just trying to look up how it's
Oh, I know. She was literally no, when it was forced, she
Don't do it.
No, so I don't have to work.
Well, I have this is a
Okay, we're gonna take a 10-minute break because.
Thank you so much.
You gotta get that.